Hello and welcome to An Old Man Watches. And today I'm going to be talking about the 2011 cheapy supernatural action film Orcs. And in this film our main character is a US park ranger named Cal Robertson. And Cal is rather disaffected with his job. He slacks off as much as he can. He dodges whatever responsibilities his boss tries to send his way. He generally, does the minimum possible effort at every turn. So when he's paired up with the enthusiastic new trainee ranger Hobart Hobie Moss, Cal is ecstatic. This is a great opportunity to, basically dump all of his work onto the eager youngster. Unfortunately for Cal and for Hobie and for pretty much any living human being in the area, it just so happens that this particular national park sits over a bunch of caverns which are filled with bloodthirsty orcs. Now, the orcs have been trapped down there for hundreds of years by a cave-in. But wouldn't you know it, just as the movie starts, events are about to take a turn, the creatures are about to get free, and they will, as you might imagine, inevitably go on a murderous rampage. Orcs, it seems, have pretty much no purpose other than to kill people, and anyone who is in the park, including Cal and Hobie, are absolutely on the agenda for murdering. And thus the slovenly, lazy Cal finds himself on the front lines of the struggle to stay alive. Will he rise to the challenge and prove himself to the woman he once disappointed? Well, it's a movie, so you can probably guess the answer, frankly. So this small-budget independent production boasts the wonderfully bombastic tagline, "They will eat your face off!" The actual film it's an adequate diversion for 80 minutes, but it doesn't quite deliver on the implied excess and schlocky fun that the marketing suggests. It's promising a level of kind of gung-ho, over-the-top action that it doesn't really have. But let's talk about the film does feature and why I think it falls a little bit short of what it could be in the entertainment stakes. So, first of all, you probably won't be surprised to hear that this film includes a number of nods to The Lord of the Rings. There probably wouldn't be that many people who would make a cheapy fantasy-themed action film about orcs and then not reference the most prominent pop culture example of media including the species. In the case of this movie, the nods include several scenes that echo or parody parts of Tolkien's novels or of Peter Jackson's film adaptations of those books. For example, Orcs has a scene where three characters hide among tree roots as the orcs prowl past, and the composition of the shot is straight out of the scene in Jackson's Fellowship of the Rings, where the hobbits hide from one of the Black Riders. Similarly, the visual design of the orcs and their gear also feels quite reminiscent of the Peter Jackson movies. It's not as varied or as detailed, no doubt a consequence of the very different budgets of the two projects, but within its limitations, it's done rather well. The makeup is good, and the weapons, the scraps and armour look suitably menacing. You might be tempted to Google and look at some stills online. I don't think the stills look as good as the movie does when it's going, because when you've got motion and activity, you're unable to sit there and notice the flaws, and the lighting is better, that sort of thing. So if you do Google stills, don't judge the movie's makeup work based on that. It does look quite good in the actual movie. Now, whereas the Tolkien link is obvious, almost expected, you might say, what you might not have expected is that the other big influence on the film is George Romero's genre-defining zombie movie, Night of the Living Dead. But it is, and when you think about it, it does actually make quite a good deal of sense. Night of the Living Dead sees a small group of people barricaded into a single farmhouse, trying to keep out a horde of ravening monsters with whom they can't even speak, let alone reason. There's a number of consequences of that. You only need a limited cast of actors in the speaking roles, and let's remember that speaking roles are much more expensive than the extras and stunt workers that you need for your bad guys. And you also save on location costs because most of your movies happening in one place. It also provides a simple and coherent focus for the film, one that the audience can easily grasp, and keep the monsters out. Like, that's what the movie's about. Now, of course, Orcs is far from the first film to borrow the Romero formula. I just spoke about in my last video about the debt that a host of zombie films owe to Night of the Living Dead, after all, and it won't be the last. Heck, to be honest, it's not even like Romero came up with that formula whole cloth anyway. History and legend are filled with stories of small but determined group of defenders holding a wave of enemies at bay. I've reviewed 300. It's based on a very similar kind of, small outnumbered force defending and holding back the enemy. It's also racist and homophobic, but it comes out of a long historical and narrative tradition. Now, I'm a fan of both Lord of the Rings, the books more than the films, and of Night of the Living Dead. But alas, in my opinion, Orcs doesn't quite manage to be two great tastes that go great together. And I think the main reason that it falls short and ends up in the, it wasn't a terrible way to spend 80 minutes column, rather than the, this was great fun category, is that it lacks a gear change. And by that, I mean that having established the basic scenario, there are bloodthirsty orcs and our heroes are besieged, the film doesn't really meaningfully escalate or evolve that situation. There are still orcs outside, and they make various attacks, but there's little sense that the odds are growing worse, nor do we really see Cal and his allies adopt more and more risky strategies of their own, likely because the situation isn't growing obviously more dire. I mean, yes, let's be clear, there's absolutely some dialogue about how things are getting worse, but I don't feel like the film really sells the truth of those claims. It makes them, and it expects you to accept them. Now, possibly this all comes down to financial constraints. It's definitely noticeable that we never see more than a handful of the orcs at a time, except in sort of very long distance shots, and I suspect the production lacked the time and funds to do proper makeup for large numbers of extras, so we only see a small number of featured orcs up close. That's much like in sort of old Doctor Who, when you'd be told, there's an army of Cybermen conquering London, and then you get a bunch of shots of different parts of London, and there'd be 4 Cybermen marching across the screen in each of them, and it would be, it's the same 4 guys in the same 4 Cybermen suits, because that's all they have. And I think that, holds this movie back a little bit, and the film needed to find a way around its limitations more successfully than it actually managed to do. And what that ultimately means is that Orcs is, it's fine, but there are definitely better Our Heroes Are Besieged movies out there, including, obviously, the Romero one, from which it draws such a lot of its inspiration. So ultimately, it's probably only worth seeing, if you are, like me, both a Tolkien and a Romero tragic, and that mashup sounds like your kind of thing. Otherwise, you can probably skip it. But, for a small budget film, it's reasonably well acted, it's reasonably well directed, the makeup is pretty good, it's just probably a little bit less than the sum of its parts, basically. But that's Orcs. Next time, 1972's Silent Running, a science fiction film from an era when major science fiction films frequently tried to be cerebral and thoughtful, with admittedly varying levels of success. How successful is Silent Running? Well, we'll find out next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.